Coming up.
Leaders, grow a pair. Set a good example for your employees of what good looks like and how you lead through your organization's values. Your values and your mission and all that stuff shouldn't just be posters on a wall. So last night, I got a comment on one of my other videos that kind of just stopped me in my tracks. So I'm going to throw it up on the screen and let me read it to you. My awesome boss just died. He was an amazing manager who led by example. He took me under his wing and I was quickly promoted. Then he died of a heart attack and I got a new manager who hated me. She micromanaged and overloaded me with work. I went on an ADA medical leave for cancer and she fired me last week, which I believe is illegal. Please do a video on why HR always seems to protect toxic managers and not employees. First of all, I am so sorry this happened to you. I think cancer has touched so many of our lives, mine included, and I wish you well, and I hope you have a speedy recovery. On top of that, you lost a mentor, and I'm sure you're still grieving through that. And then you're confronted with a person who seemingly lacks empathy because they terminated your employment with the backdrop of all that has happened. So to your question, why would a company rather lose great employees than fix a toxic manager is a question that comes up repeatedly in the comments of my videos and some other things. So we're going to address that today. We're going to unpack why this happens, why does HR let it happen, and what you can do about it. I've heard this story so many times from people in the comments or sending me emails, and it's almost cliche at this point, right? The good boss leaves, the person you thrived under leaves for whatever reason, and then whoever backfills them, suddenly you went from being on top, kind of the star pupil, and now you're on the bottom and you're under the gun and you almost have whiplash about how could this happen. And while I'm on the topic, if you want, check out my last video on this exact topic. Also, the other layer here I want to kind of point out before we get into the rest of this video is that this employee in this story has also exhausted her family medical leave, 12 weeks of leave and job protection. So I think that plays into this. And what I would say here is, can the employer absolutely separate the employee after they've exhausted their 12 weeks of job protection? Yeah. Is it shitty? 100%. I'm fortunate that I worked for several companies that actually would do the right thing by the employee and not be constrained with, oh, they've exhausted their 12 weeks. The following day, we're going to terminate them. They actually thought through a lens of humanity about their employees and their staff. And I think when companies and managers look at their employees, again, through that lens, they're going to be more successful. That's going to pay higher dividends than just being very surgical about how they handle their employees. But let's get back to the question at hand. Why does HR seemingly protect these toxic managers? Sometimes it's less about protecting them and more about the system around them. And I am not trying to offer excuses here. I absolutely believe that HR should advocate for the employee in this equation. However, there are some scenarios at play that could actually hamper HR's effectiveness in these types of scenarios. So first of all, what could actually hinder HR's effectiveness here is where it sits in the organization. Some HR departments actually report into operations or into finance. So when they're trying to, coach business leaders, right, on what the right thing is to do and what the legalities are, sometimes business leaders will also have their thumb on the scale because they want results. It's all about the metrics and what the dollars are. So they'll say, you know what? HR, you work for me. I'm taking what you're saying and I'm still going to do what I want to do anyway. So an HR department or an HR leader, if they are reporting up to this person and their job depends on it, that could be where they seemingly support the toxic leader because that toxic leader gets the results rather than actually influencing the business to make a informed decision that is in the best interest of both the employer and the employee. But even if HR doesn't report to operations or to finance or something else, they report directly to the CEO, that could still be a credibility problem because of how HR is viewed. I've worked at some great organizations where HR had a seat at the table at the highest levels of the organization, and that worked out pretty well. But sometimes that's not the case. The HR could be viewed as a just person who does payroll, benefits, and hiring and doesn't see them as that strategic advisor to the business. And I think that's a very short-sighted way for business leaders to view HR. They should see them as an advisor to the business so that when they are making these decisions, they are impacting their workforce in a positive way and really leading with empathy. That's a good, sound business decision, in my humble opinion. But sadly, not all organizations look at HR that way. So the other thing too is, HR is there to help mitigate risk to the organization. But sometimes the business actually overcorrects on mitigating that risk. The situation breaks out and the reflex is, okay, how do we control this situation? So they ask themselves, what is the safest thing we can do legally? And in this example, it is they're waiting for FMLA job protections to expire after 12 weeks, which then inform the termination. So they're really not looking at it from what is the right thing to do culturally for the organization. They're looking at it to, how can I contain this and how can we make it go away as quickly as possible? Again, I am not here making excuses for human resources. Some are effective and they do their jobs in supporting the business, but also being an advocate for employees. And I know what you're going to say, HR is not your friend and everything. Yes, I can understand why you might feel that way. I'm just adding a little bit of additional context in this segment, just to help people understand sometimes that HR might be fighting a losing battle depending on how the organization is set up. And it also could come down to a resource constraint. I've had client groups where there are thousands of employees and myself and my team cannot be in 100 places at once. And one sign of this could be either you never see your HR person, or when something's going down, whether it be, a separation like the one in our example today, or somebody's being put on a performance plan. If you don't see HR in that equation, that's a problem. That's a red flag. That means some of these leaders, some of these toxic leaders could be going a bit rogue and just kind of saying, I'm looking at it through this way. It's a business decision, and off they go. It depends on the organization's culture. The tone is set at the top. I will give an example of my time at Southwest Airlines. That was an employee-centric company. Maybe not so much now. I don't know. But when I was there, it was. And the leaders and the founders of the company set that tone, set that expectation, set that example about what was the right thing to do for them. Sometimes it wasn't the most cost-effective things to do from a business standpoint, but Southwest and those leaders at that time were very focused on what can we do that's doing it right by our employees and setting them up and leading with empathy and leading with their value in the forefront of our minds. But some other companies that we've talked about that we could probably name here are so focused on the people and that deliver, right? They're delivering the best metrics, right? And that is overshadowing anything else. They're more focused on the what they do than the how they do it. It's not always that HR wants to protect toxic managers. Sometimes it's the way the organization is set up, the way things are incentivized, and the example that leadership sets. So let's talk about these toxic managers. Why did they survive? Why is it always the person that is the biggest jerk that seems to just karma never seems to come for them? I argue that it will eventually, but they deliver results. They get the results, and the company is really not focused on how they're getting the results. They're just focused on that they're getting results. And, we've seen these people too. These toxic people seem to manage up extremely well. They are the ones that are, more invested in how they're looking to the higher ups and more invested in themselves and more invested in their career than they are in the team that actually helps them achieve the results. With a toxic leader, no matter if they're toxic or not, but if they're getting the results, right, and they're still a jerk, they're hard to replace. They're expensive to replace just in time, from when you manage that employee out of the business and then the recruitment time and the lost productivity and all the things, they're super expensive to replace. So if you think about it that way, that's why sometimes they're left to linger. These toxic leaders, they're savvy, they're smart. They know where the bodies are buried. They know which closets have skeletons in them, and they wield that. They leverage that to their own benefit. And sometimes it's like, okay, Joe over here knows exactly where the bodies are buried, so we're gonna not performance manage Joe and hold him accountable. We're just going to let him do what he wants to. Grow a pair, leaders. Hold Joe accountable and make him lead in the values that you as a company are saying we value, and this is how we treat our employees. Hold that person accountable, and then get rid of Joe. In corporate America, it's all about optics. And if the toxic boss looks like they are in control, they're calm, they have it all together, and then the employee who is out of their mind and of dealing with this, they've just been pushed to their brink, and they're the emotional ones, leadership's always going to side with the person that's calm. And unfortunately, that is a manipulation tactic from some of these toxic leaders. They remain calm, they remain professional, and say, look, I'm great. This person over here is a big pile of crazy, so they're the ones that need to go. When in reality, you're just at your wit's end. All reason has gone aside, and you're like, I just can't take it anymore. And that's informing how you're showing up. So what can you do? Now, I hate to sound like a broken record and lead with this, but it's going to pay dividends if you do this down the road, especially if you're going down the road of a complaint to an agency or there's some litigation involved. But the first thing is keep all your receipts. You got to document everything. You've got to have all of your performance reviews. You've also got to look, if you're being performance managed or you've been fired, you've got to look objectively. Did the company actually have a point in what they were holding you accountable to, right? So look objectively, and if you do have something to own in the equation, own it. That will actually inspire trust in whoever you are interacting with. Yes, employment attorney, I own that I had some performance issues, but I was working on them, and this is how I feel I was unfairly terminated from my role. That's going to make you show up better than just saying, I'm outraged, I was the victim. One thing you can do if you're still employed is you've got to think about using your internal mechanisms to voice concerns. One of them could be HR. So again, if you've not seen HR in the equation, go seek them out and try to go as calm as possible and keep it very fact-based. I know some of you don't trust HR, and I get it. That's fine. But what's going to happen if you do find yourself talking to an employment attorney or to the EEOC or the state equivalent, they're going to ask you, have you leveraged your employer's internal complaint mechanisms, whether it's HR, whether it's an ethics department or an ethics hotline, whether it's a compliance department? Did you alert the company that there was a problem or you felt you were being discriminated against by this manager? If you haven't, that could be a problem, right? They're going to look at it like, well, we're going straight to litigation, but you haven't even given the company the chance to respond. And I can understand why you wouldn't want to do that, right? The way you've been treated by management, you've lost all trust in anything in the company. So you don't, you want to just kind of protect yourself and not actually leverage those things. But I would say if I'm playing this hand out, it's better if you've actually voiced concerns, again, calmly and professionally and fact-based, to those internal complaint mechanisms. You can fire off a letter to the CEO of the company or somebody in senior leadership, because I would say, in many companies, those senior leaders can't have their eyes on everything. So sometimes these could be blind spots about they have toxic rogue managers out there just doing what they want, achieving the results, but getting them with lots of bodies in their wake. So bringing this to their attention, again, I would say calmly and professionally and fact-based. Could it have some ramifications on the back end if you go straight, outside the chain of command? I would say if you've exhausted all of the other mechanisms in your organization, firing off a letter to the CEO or to a senior vice president could actually get you somewhere. Get some external advice. Go to an employment attorney. You can get a consultation. Talk, in this case, the person was on, not only was on family medical leave, but then was on the American with Disabilities Act leave of some sort. So I would engage that agency and say, hey, look, I was terminated. Is this a lawful termination? Can they actually do this given what has transpired? And you'll get the direct, most informed guidance from those agencies rather than somebody like me on YouTube or on Reddit or on TikTok that is just giving their opinion. So I will say at this point, I am not an attorney. If you feel you've been discriminated against, you should absolutely go seek out an employment counsel or one of the agencies we've talked about, the EEOC, the ADA, family medical leave, or some sort of state equivalent. I will say, even though the employer probably legally could have terminated her in this example, they could have done it with more empathy, with more kindness, right? Maybe some sort of severance package, and that included medical benefits continuance for a certain period of time, just not to cut this employee off and leave them hanging without anything, right? Maybe they did. I don't know. I'm just kind of reading between the lines. But they could have still, separated her from the organization, but done a little bit to make it a softer landing, just looking somewhat through the eyes of humanity. So many employers, small, big, or medium size, still have the primary focus on what the employees, what the leadership is achieving, just a focus on the results. And until they actually give a 50-50 weight to not only what they achieve, but how they achieve it, then HR is still going to be having to come behind and clean up these problems as best they can, because they pile up time and time again. So employers, please look at how your leaders are leading and what decisions they're making. So this brings me to what I've had it with. And this is probably brewing a long time because I've seen this movie so many times at so many different employers. And that is the bad apples of the organization that are protected, that nothing sticks to them. Kind of like someone we know, but I digress. But nothing sticks to them and they never get held accountable. Senior leaders grow a pair. Set a good example for your employees of what good looks like and how you lead through your organization's values. Your values and your mission and all that stuff shouldn't just be posters on a wall. They can't just be a plaque on the wall. They have to be brought to life through the company's leadership, from CEO all the way to frontline supervisor. And I've had it with people getting away with murder and getting away with bad leadership just because they get results. So to the viewer who wrote this comment that we've been talking about today, I'm so sorry this has happened to you. I still say, contact an employment attorney, contact the ADA, tell them what's happened, contact some state agencies. It's going to be a lot, but at least you will be empowered to do so. I would also contact your unemployment benefits and submit a claim for your unemployment benefits. You're also going to get COBRA benefits continuance in the mail. So make sure you're reading that. I think they still send it snail mail, but you might get an email from it about it. So make sure you're engaging with that so you can ensure some benefits continuance as you navigate your cancer diagnosis and all the treatments and such. So to anybody else watching, tell me, have you ever witnessed this in your job, in your company, where HR seemingly protects the bad apples, the toxic managers? Let me know in the comments. And I'm not here to say HR is your friend. I will never change your opinions. I'm just trying to, in this video, offer a little bit of context about the balancing act that sometimes HR finds itself in and the context in which they have to operate. Not excuses. I do believe that a strong HR department, a strong HR leader will actually push back and speak truth to power and say, look, this is not the right thing to do. We should do better by our employees. That's going to pay bigger dividends for us if we have an engaged, loyal workforce than a short-sighted termination of a great employee. So if you like this type of content, I would absolutely be honored if you would like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, check out the video I did on toxic managers just last week and tell me what you think. So if you are under a leader right now at a company where that leader has your best interest in mind and you're thriving under them, I absolutely wish you continued success. If you're in a job search right now, hang strong and keep applying for those jobs. I know it's a tough market out there, but stay strong and try and just keep applying for those jobs. And until next time, my name is Rob, and take care. This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.